All right, let's take one more call and then we'll get out of here. All right, we got a lot of people hanging on the phone. We don't have numbers on the call screen anymore, so it's tough to know. But we've had a lot of people who've been hanging on for basically an hour. And I'll just choose one of them. 863. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Sam?
Yes?
Hi, Sam. This is Jill Rios Nunez from Lakeland, Florida.
Hello, Jill. What's on your mind?
I live in probably the reddest part of Central Florida.
Oof.
I am a tiny blue house in a sea of ruby red in this part of Polk County. I kind of, two things. I kind of gauge how, like, I'm not electorally sound and like analysts like yourself, but I watch cars go by on the railroad, or, on the highway, on the road going home, and it's just a lot of Trump stickers most of the time. It's a lot of Trump 2016, all of that. But noticing lately, just to give you a little bit of hope, I saw a couple weeks ago, I saw a Bernie 2016 sticker still hanging on there, and I was kind of happy about that. But within the last week or so, and especially since the Joe Rogan podcast last week, I've seen about 4 or 5 Bernie 2020 stickers.
Wow.
So
it's happening.
It gives me, I know, right?
Well, I gotta say,
so
I would love to see an academic assessment. There's got to be some PhD student out there who's like, I'm going to try and track just how much to see if I can see what, because now I think that interview is up to 9 or 10 million people. And that is...
Those are good control factors too. The biggest sort of alternative media guy and then a big politician like that.
I mean, that is an enormous amount of views for an interview. And...
Well, I mean, personally, I have a lot of people around that listen to that podcast, and I do occasionally, but I mean, it was astounding how many people, knowing how much I'm a huge Bernie supporter, and they've come to me like, well, why didn't you tell me?
Wow.
I was like, I tried.
Well,
because it gave him a platform where he's not screaming over 5 other people, half of whom are trying to attack him. It gave him an hour to just sit and talk about the real issues that he believes in, and he gets so little time on the mainstream media to do that. And I think it's a very big turning point for him.
I mean, it's the fascinating thing too about it is that you could probably, the demo, right? We can already start with the notion that it's probably just people under the age of 40. More or less. I mean, obviously there's some stragglers, myself, I probably drive the average age up a little bit, but most of the people who are watching this are going to be in their late teens, early 20s. How old are you? With all due respect, if you don't mind me asking.
I'm about to turn 26 in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. I mean, I think your age cohort are the people who watch, Rogan. I mean, that's just my guess, but it's a fairly
the replies to this video
probably not my gender, but you're right. Probably right about that.
But look at these.
The replies are amazing.
Yeah, holy crap! I can't believe I'm saying this, but Bernie Sanders just earned my vote in 2020. It's plain that he really wants to improve things for everyone in this nation, except maybe the uber wealthy or so rich that regular people look to poor people. If you ask me, the billionaires will be just fine if we follow through on. I mean, it's just this is.
Media society has brainwashed me to believe Bernie was just a radical old nuthead. This hour and 7 minutes completely changed my mind. I cannot believe how much I resonated with what he was saying.
Yeah, I mean,
Bernie should cut an ad.
That entire comment section is just amazing.
Yeah.
It gave me so much hope. And so the second thing I wanted to get to leading up to that is the Joe Rogan podcast happened Wednesday or Thursday of last week. And then towards the end of that week is when I was watching your program live when you covered the map of Bernie Sanders' individual supporters. Right after that, there was like this hit piece that I've seen a couple of YouTube videos on that is like by the New York Times, like Bernie Sanders campaign watcher or something like that. He went out and did like nobody's listening to Bernie in Iowa. He's falling dead in Iowa. And if I'm allowed to cuss, I want to ask you how much you think between the Joe Rogan podcast and that map is like how much of it that was like an oh shit moment for the New York Times because they're just
there is no
like
there I don't think that they register. I mean I've told this story before and remind me tomorrow. Michael and I have to make a concerted effort to find out who this reporter was. But in the run up to must have been spring of 2015, there was Michael, somehow a reporter reached out to us, I'm not exactly sure how, from Politico and wanted to talk to me because he was doing a story on Martin O'Malley and wanted to get a sense. So I got on the phone with a guy and he's like, look, I'm doing a story on Martin O'Malley, and Martin O'Malley's question that he's asking is, how do I draw people? How do I draw the, how do I can't remember how he phrased it. How do I draw people away from Elizabeth Warren? And I'm like, Elizabeth Warren, she's not running. He's got to worry about Bernie Sanders. And the guy laughed. He laughed. And I'm like, I'm serious. You don't understand. There's a lot of support for Bernie Sanders. And he's like, yeah, but he's a socialist. And I'm like, I don't think people care about what he calls himself. There's a lot of support for him. I think that's, if I was Martin O'Malley, that's what I'd be talking about is how do I get people away from Bernie Sanders?
Years ago, everybody just said Trump was just a racist old guy. So, well, I mean.
He is. He is just a racist old guy. But my point is that that reporter was not going to listen to me. That reporter probably still believes the exact same thing he did about Bernie as he did then. They're not going to move. And on some level, it doesn't really matter. Bernie Sanders is going to win this or not, regardless of what the mainstream media does. I mean, it's just, he's set up in such a way that if he does what he needs to do, right? I mean, like, think about where we are in the campaign right now. And they know what they're doing this time. He's running to win this time. And going on something like Rogan was a super smart idea. And I suspect, I think like to a certain extent, when we do videos, when Pacman did videos, when Kyle Kalinske did videos saying that Rogan's not having people on the left enough, and he's feeling somewhat self-conscious of it, and he has Pacman on, he has Kalinske on, and we continue to press him and just that whole IDW. I think that's part of the reason why he basically either accepted an opportunity to have Cornel West on or seek him out. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Bernie comes on within a couple of weeks of Cornel West. I have a feeling that that's the way that works. I mean, that's the way it just works with our guests.
Oh, yeah.
And so this is the interesting thing about the era that we're living in, is that there's an opportunity to influence not the mainstream media. We just saw that example of was it O'Donnell? I can't remember who it was, from MSNBC, not even sort of admitting that she didn't know, that she made a mistake. And having outlets that are not so defensive and having access to them in this world where 7 to whatever, 10, 11 million people are going to be able to have access to Bernie, because people on Twitter were, doing stuff. I mean, so they just sort of, it's pretty gratifying, but we'll see. If Bernie wins, it's going to be despite the fact that the mainstream media has been sort of
and all the
blacking
better
him out.
of him for it.
Well, listen, I appreciate the call, and hang in there.
Just one more thing.
Yeah.
Left is best. Thank you so much for taking my call. I've been listening to your show for like 3 years, and this is the first time I've actually been able to call. Can I get the horn sounds? It's my daughter's second day of kindergarten, and I want to be able to play it for her.
Oh, good for her. Are you ready? Which one? Do you want this one?
I think
Or do you
about
want
the shofar?
Or do you want this one? Appreciate the call.
I got both.
You got both. Bye.
Hell yeah.
All right, folks. That's all our time for today. I'm sorry.